Towards the end of the talk, Professor Dan Cameron is going to share with us some motivational anecdotes about the long-standing PV research community on this campus. Professor Dan Cameron is the energy policy expert on this campus who needs no introduction to most of the audience today. Many of us have taken his classes on ER 200, Energy and Society, and MSc 226, PV Materials. I took them in my first 2 years, and I like them so much that I continue to do research with them on energy policy in the PV industry. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And that work is recently published in the Energy Policy Journal. If you are interested in that paper, you can find relevant information by Google PV Innovation Policy. Talking about innovation in the PV technology, I'm very excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Mattson, a heavyweight in the US solar manufacturing sector and the CEO of Siva Power. This is a tech company that is able to produce 19% efficient solar cells in just 10 months, starting from scratch. Mr. Mattson has received numerous awards throughout his career in the semiconductor industry. Among his many achievements, he has founded 2 publicly traded semiconductor equipment firms. To give you an idea, one of them was acquired for $3.3 billion. Mr. Mattson was also a venture partner at Vantage Point Capital Partners prior to Siva Power. Today, we are very happy to have Mr. Mattson to share with us his vantage point view of the PV industry today. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Mr. Mattson.
A real huge opportunity in innovation. I think the theme of this is really what's coming here in what I call Solar 2.0. And there's innovation in several different things. It's not just technical innovation. So if there's any biz school people here, there's absolutely, in fact, key driving force might be business innovations. And even in manufacturing, and that's what I'm challenged with right now, is going into the operations side of it. So there's innovation all the way through in the market. Now, you know, in a short talk, it's kind of hard to really hit it. So just by nature, it has to be a 30,000-foot overview. But maybe after we could have questions and answers, gets into the details of it. And by way of full disclosure, besides the other things I've done, I'm attempting to become an author. I have to honestly tell you, I suck at it. I thought I could write a book in 3 months. I started last year. Finished the first draft a year ago. I'm still in the editing process, but the book's called Solar 2.0, and so I've had a chance to really dig into this and had a lot of fun revelations and learnings just by trying to go from being a CEO of a semi company to a venture capitalist in clean tech to a CEO of a solar company and then become an author. I think the hardest job is figuring out how to write a book. That is not easy at all. Anyhow, starting off. The market opportunity is huge, and everyone has their own idea what this looks like. But this energy gap here is the difference between what energy is going to be required around the world, because energy fuels the developing economies, and what is going to be available from conventional sources for a variety of reasons as they become limited. And this number here changes quite a bit depending on who you talk to. But even this relatively conservative here, because you can see it's about a third of the energy requirements would be renewable, is 46,000 gigawatts. So just to give you an idea, we did about 36, 37 gigawatts of solar last year, about 31, 32 gigawatts of wind. To give you an idea of where we're off, is several orders of magnitude. Huge potential. The total market available here is going to be mind-boggling to the people looking at it today. So what's happened recently in terms of some of these energy businesses moving to Asia, specifically China, you look at this actually as the first wave. It's like Web 1.0 when everyone thought that Yahoo and AOL, it's all over, it's done, there's nothing left. And where are they today? So I think there's a real opportunity when this market's this big and we're really just at the very beginning of it. I won't go through this because Dan has told me everyone here is very educated on all these things, but just a quick look through here. These are all the natural suspects of where we're going to get that energy on that chart from: coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydro, geo, wind, solar. But for a variety of reasons, a lot of them are limited, and we won't get into this because you guys already know it. But my assessment is we really come down to there's several contenders to fill this gap. we'll be using all of them, of course, it shows. But what about this gap and, what we have to fill with renewables? And they all have kind of limitations. And my favorite one here, solar, has this really interesting thing. It has a real bright red X on cost. Even with everything we've done in solar, it's still the most expensive energy source. And this is a commodity. So you can see that would be kind of a limitation. But the balancing point here is that really we have had a kind of historic change in cost structure. You guys are probably familiar with the learning curve here. But that's 30 years of data. And we've halved the cost 7 times. It's unbelievable. You have 7 I wonder how many industries, I haven't done a study of this, but how many industries have ever had 7 halvings of a manufacturing cost? Pretty amazing. And what happened recently with China coming in, this was with a polysilicon glut you guys probably all know about. When that reversed, we've had a historic decline, kind of fell off the learning curve. And the point here is that I really believe, and this is what a lot of the work in my book was around, is getting to being able to prove, it's hard to prove you pass the tipping point. Because when you pass the tipping point, you're at the top. So it doesn't look like you passed it. When you get down here, it's obvious that you passed the tipping point. But calling this is always a little bit of a conjecture. But with studying every single element of the cost structure, the sunshot goals of getting to $1 a watt on the utility scale installation, looking at every single element, the soft costs, everything, inverters, balance system, panels, and so it seems to me inevitable that we're going to hit those numbers. And so I think we're somewhere down the slope here. And so if that's true, really, then if you can change this, now we're not quite there yet, but if this goes green, then it's kind of game over. Not that solar is going to take over the world. I mean, we have actually need, I believe, in an all of the above energy policy. We need wind, we need geo, we need hydro, we need all of them, natural gas. We're going to need them all. But the one that can truly scale with almost unlimited scale, the one that's completely clean, and if we hit this cost, and people love it, there's an intangible here, which I put like distributed generation into this category of intangibles. There's a lot of intangibles. Solar is great on almost all the intangibles, which means market acceptance can happen. So if we turn that one green, it really means it's a little bit off to the races. And so this is, I'm going kind of quickly through the introduction here because you guys probably know all this already. But basically, this is my own projection here on what we have with all the, sorry for the eye chart, oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear, wind, solar, hydro, plus geo and bio. The one that's coming up here is solar. And you can see it gets to a pretty decent amount. But even in this projection, it's not even that aggressive. It's showing 15% of the energy mix out at 2050. Only 15% of the energy mix out in 2050. That 15%, it's not all of the renewable 46,000 gigawatts I mentioned, but if it just gets that much of the total available market, it's 15,000 gigawatts. So again, the opportunities are really huge. And by way of saying that, it really, I've lived through one of the S-curves, as Andy was mentioned. I started out in semiconductors in 1976. Applied Materials had 200 employees. it was a lot of fun. And I rode this and created one company here, created another company there. I rode it for 30 years. It's a heck of a ride. I retired right around here. Good time to retire because it gets boring. It really does. It's just big is better, and it's about just processes, who has the best process. It's not about innovation anymore. It really isn't about innovation anymore. But we're here. We're right at the beginning of a 30, 40-year growth cycle, and it's going to be exciting as hell. It's going to be a heck of a ride, and it's going to be all, in fact, let me get to the next slide. This thing is going to be all innovation. And we'll talk about what those innovations are that's going to be required to drive it. But first I want to put this a little bit in context. This is might be on the cover of my book. I don't know. I'm testing it out here. This is a picture kind of what the story is. It's this 30, 40-year growth curve. Every industry goes through this as it matures and becomes a major part of the world economy. This is what you go through. I believe we're here at the tipping point, as we talked about. But we're really transitioning from, we'll have some good news, bad news for the technologists in the room. We're really transitioning for where technology is everything. I mean, it's all about technology. Technology is very exciting. And that's really more in the hobby phase. When you go to commercialization, it's all about cost. And the technology is important to reduce the cost. If the technology increases the cost, no one cares. So we're really in a big transition here, and I'll talk about that a little bit because it has a real impact on where you should put your resources. That's really key. And so cost is a driving factor here, but innovation is necessary to drive costs. And the goal, I think, to keep our eyes on the goal here, like Solar 3.0 is out here, where it gets boring, It's not so much fun. But that's an exciting place. That's how I really believe we'll see the democratization of energy. Energy available for anyone, anywhere. It doesn't matter if you have oil-rich fields, doesn't matter if your country has a lot of coal deposits, doesn't matter, you can get solar energy. It could be in a village in Africa or India, it could be one person on an island. I think what this is going to enable is the true democratization of energy. And if you believe the thing about energy leads to economic development, it could be one of the elements that can eliminate poverty. So I think this is kind of an exciting thing happen, you're going to see here. And because solar is one of these technologies, I mean, you can't put a nuke in your backyard. You can't put a 5 megawatt turbine, wind turbine in your backyard. Almost none of the technologies that can scale to solve a global problem like this can be scaled down to a small size so you can carry it on your person or put it in your home, except solar. So it's kind of exciting. So this distributed generation, I think, is a big part of this trend. And as I mentioned, everybody can have it. Every country can have their own energy source. Imagine a world where no one went to war over energy again. That'd be beautiful. Might be half the wars. So energy independence and energy security are all key things, and I think solar enables. So I think it's worth working towards this. It's great for me. I came out of retirement a little bit to do this because I think this is a worthy goal. This is exciting to be part of the innovation that drives us to those kind of goals. So that's the picture. Now a little bit, to save time and put the presentation together, I just kind of stole stuff from my book. So it's about Solar 2.0, as I mentioned. And in the book, it isn't just talking about what we just went through. That's kind of the introduction to the book in terms of the opportunity and the excitement. Being kind of an engineer, I'm a problem solver. So this blue sky, exciting, cool thing, well, that's neat. How do you get there? I mean, where's the reality in terms of what are the stepping stones? So the book ended up becoming mostly about roadmaps between here and there. And in fact, I have 7 of them there. Technology, you always have a technology roadmap, of course, so you have technology. But what's lacking in a lot of industries is manufacturing roadmap. Interesting systems is a key part of what's going to happen in solar. Business models may be the enabling technology in solar these days. An investment roadmap, because if you don't put capital into an industry, it dies. And right now, solar is actually in danger of being capital deficient, which could stop the growth. I mean, I worked on an investment roadmap to encourage investors to come into the market as well. Policy is still key, even though we're getting to the point of transitioning from policy-driven growth to economically driven growth. Policy still has a major role. And as I was just talking to Henry a second ago, where'd Henry go? Here he is. I think one of the key things that all people that are advocates for solar should understand is probably one of our biggest difficulties is public opinion and lack of understanding about solar. So I think we all need to think of education as one of the things we're trying to do. So public support or a kind of publicity roadmap is actually part of what I've worked on, because there's a lot of forces in the world protecting the status quo of coal, oil, and they're spending a lot of money, hundreds of millions, to stop renewable energy. So part of what we have to do is educate everybody. So we have the right policies. We have investors. Investors don't invest in unpopular industries. So it affects these other policies, what we think. So that's kind of what I've gone through, but we're just picking a few of them here to talk about today. That'll be the technology, manufacturing, business models, investment, and we'll just go through those real quickly. First, the technology forecast. This is a good news, bad news. Technology has been exciting, the history of solar, but just to go through what I've seen this commercialization process happen in a few industries. And when one technology kind of gets to critical mass, like you have with crystalline silicon, and you have 30 gigawatts of capacity, it sometimes just drives everything else out of the industry. Even if it's theoretically a superior technology, you can't fund it. You can't fund it when there's about 30 gigawatts of capacity and an equivalent of 50,000 engineers working on the other technologies. You and your team might have 10 engineers. They have 50,000 trying to make this other one work. So there's a critical mass that really makes it difficult for new technologies, and you've seen this in other things, like, Betamax was a better technology. I know this ages me, dates me. Betamax was a better technology than VHS. RISC microprocessors were a better technology than CISC. But you know what? Intel was behind this one. So guess what? They won. And Sony refused to license this one, so VHS got to scale and wiped out Betamax. So at some point in time in an industry, scale is what happens. I think we're transitioning over. So it won't be technology for technology's sake. And a lot of the exciting technologies may be I call them the living dead technologies. Maybe it's just staying in R&D, and they just won't ever get enough capital to get up to the gigawatt scale. And then a lot of these are things you guys might be working on. Double, triple junction devices. They just tend to be pretty expensive. And I'll get to this detail a little bit about the cost versus the benefit of technology. Amorphous silicon, single junction. You know, I did the due diligence on Alta Devices for Vantage Point. It was exciting. I mean, unbelievable technology. You know, and the business plan was to get to 50 cents a watt. Is everyone familiar with Alta Devices? That's okay. They got to about $8 a watt. So it's just not relevant in a commercial application. You know, the goal was 50 cents, got to $8. What happened to the cost? The focus can't be just on technology. And I'll have this message you just keep on, it has to be on cost in this phase. And so some of those things, they're going to fill niche markets is what's going to happen to them. And a lot of these early, what used to be called third generation technologies, unless they really are very clearly have high efficiency with low cost, they might not make it. And I'll talk a little bit about one that may be an exception to that. But what that leaves behind is you have to kind of be at scale. So a lot of the technology will go into accelerating the ones that are already kind of at scale. And really, this is the NREL data showing the maximum efficiency in the world. So these are the world record champion kind of devices. And a much important event, unheralded event though, that's interesting to happen last year, is that SIG's thin film actually surpassed crystalline silicon for the first time in history. And that's not a trivial event because the performance, it's always been, silicon has higher performance, thin film's cheaper. But if you could get silicon type performance with thin film cost structure, that's a killer technology. And that the R&D labs pointed the way that might be possible just this last year. And you can see here that if we look at manufacturing, so this doesn't matter, it is R&D. What about in the manufacturing floor? The numbers are much lower because this is like 20% here versus 13% here. So you can see there's a gap between manufacturing and R&D. But you can see that's been climbing. The gap has been narrowing from what's been available in the lab. But it's a very clear rate if you look at what's happening with SIG. So this can cross over in 2 to 3 years. If that happens, there's a chance that the $50 billion that was invested in China in crystalline silicon technology could be sunk cost. If in fact this crossover occurs, and you can do it while maintaining the low cost structure of thin film, it doesn't matter that it's spent $50 billion. It's too expensive. And just like in semiconductors, where every 6, 7 years you get a new generation, it doesn't matter about those factors. They're obsolete factors. So there isn't really an opportunity. It isn't game over yet, and this is one technology that very clearly has a shot. So I really think that SIG is one of the most promising technologies out there. There's another one that's fairly interesting. Perovskite is maybe an exception, and mostly because the speed at which it's come up the efficiency map. You can see here going up to over about 16% efficiency, and I saw a report yesterday that someone unverified, but around 19% efficiency. So if you could do this now, what happens with a lot of these sexy technologies is they can do that, but they also end up becoming very expensive to manufacture. The company I'm working at right now, we spent $40 million figuring out that nanoparticles were cheaper to manufacture. We thought they were. And we spent $40 million trying to make it work. But it turns out to be about the same cost or even more cost. So if there was a penalty in terms of performance, there wasn't really low-cost nanoparticle manufacturing technique. So it really depends on how this is commercialized. And so that's really key. There's so things about, if you can really solve like the stability and kind of a commercial implementation that's low cost, this might be an exciting technology. So they're still there. There's still real interesting technical opportunities. The bar just keeps getting raised as the incumbents move ahead, and they have billions being spent in those technologies. You just recognize it's not wide open anymore. It's not kind of a level playing field. But there still are opportunities like this. Now about that, I was just mentioning this issue between cost and performance. And what I really wanted to mention here, this dollar, the almighty dollar per watt that everyone talks about in the solar industry, there are actually two components to that. And sometimes when I'm talking to investors, they really only know about one component, efficiency. In fact, if you look in the market, this thing, dollars per watt, is called cost. It's not really the cost, it's the cost performance ratio. The cost is this, and in the market, if you try to find data on dollars per square meter, you can't even find it. There's not even a name for that parameter. It's half of the equation on dollars per watt, and there's not even a name for it. The industry is so focused on technology, so focused on efficiency, that really has not paid very much attention to cost. So you can have situations like Alta Devices that hits the efficiency target, exceeds it. It's unbelievable, beautiful work being done at Alta, but at the cost structure more than an order of magnitude off. So I think that what we're going to see, as I mentioned before, going from Solar 1.0, about technology excitement, and then cost drivers in Solar 2.0, is that the cost, and this is kind of a detailed method of actually calculating every cost in each process step, the cost to perform each step, it's called cost of ownership analysis, and what can happen there. And you can see that when you get the data, that the efficiency has been going up about 1 or 2% per decade. It's relatively slow. But the cost improvements can exceed 100%. I mean, you can actually have a halving of cost, and that's what solar has done, more than halving the cost, as I mentioned, 7 times. There's significant opportunities in cost reduction. So when you think about technology, maybe a lot of what you should be thinking about in technology is how to reduce costs as opposed to how to improve efficiency. And I think that's a shift that's going to be happening right now, because that's what has to happen, essentially. So what that really kind of speaks to is manufacturing technology. It's more about throughput of the machines and speed and cost reduction and these kind of things. And just to give you an idea of how this industry has kind of lagged behind others, this is kind of fun analysis looking. This is where I came from, the semiconductor industry. And I started earlier. This is 100 millimeter. I started way out here at 50 and 75 millimeter wafers. So it really kind of ages me. But this alone here was a 20x scaling of the substrate size when you're processing, when you go into manufacturing. If you look at flat panel displays, it's unbelievable what's happening. And that's why you see these displays everywhere. In fact, if it didn't go through this scaling, we wouldn't see that technology being ubiquitous like it is. If we want solar to be ubiquitous, what do we need to do? Well, it should scale like every other. You take a textile mill, a steel mill, a paper mill, they scale meters per square second is what they're processing. They scale the speed at which they do the manufacturing. And it's hard to do on very small substrates. So push the wrong button there. So you can see over the same time frame, silicon solar has only scaled 2x. So we need ways to scale and speed up the process a lot more. And so this is in manufacturing technology. This is where you can focus on how it's really a matter of throughput. Or if you're engineering or operations guy, you say takt times. You know, how fast does a product come out? You know, in Detroit, car comes out every 35 seconds or whatever, right? This is the key. And it's an unbelievable amount of technology behind trying to get that to happen, actually. Give you an example of how this kind of works. It's in terms of a scaling example. This is a system that's used to manufacture solar cells. And it's a sputtering system. You can see this is like a typical solar cell line would be 25 megawatts, so you buy this tool, a couple $1 million. But imagine if you were to design a system that was 10 times the capacity, 250 megawatts instead of 25 megawatts. It's going to cost a lot more money. But the issue here, when you go to put this in a factory, you need 10 of these guys. You need 10 so when you look at it, even though it's a lot more expensive, because you end up spending 24 million here for these 10, it's really 1/3 the capital, and maybe just as importantly, 1/3 the floor space. And one other thing is, if you follow what Obama's pushing now about advanced manufacturing in America, it's highly automated. In fact, completely automated. So the labor cost in this factory is 1/5 of the other factory. So this is an interesting thing in terms of highly automated, really high-speed tools change the game. And just a little bit from, this is where I lived my life, so this one may be a longer section than the other ones because I'm an equipment guy. But I have had 2 companies, and just to give you an idea where the value of those companies came from. As Andy was mentioned, that was the ultimate value of Novellus was about $3 billion. My other company, Mattson, was about $500 million. But these were really technologies that are developed. Applied Materials' best case process to deposit, for example, SiO2, this is what Novellus was founded on, was about 60 nanometers per minute, about 5% uniformity. And that company was founded on just one thing. We figured out a way to do high-density plasma deposition, which allowed us to go actually 10 times the rate, but improve the film quality. You could densify the film as you were depositing, but the high density also allowed you to go at really high rates. So it got better, cleaner, and faster. So when you take that 10x and you turn that into tools and so forth, that ended up becoming a company worth $3 billion. But it was really throughput. It was as simple as that. Because it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. I did almost the same thing at Mattson. In this case, I was looking at photoresist strip process, same thing, unique plasma technology. This time it was about 50 times the deposition rate. So when I was talking to Dan, the director of NREL Labs, and I'm trying to convince him to put more energy into this kind of research, because everyone wants a world record on efficiencies and new materials and all so forth. But and this is kind of looks more boring. But if you try to look at a process you're doing today in the lab and say, I want to do that 100 times faster, think about how much innovation that requires. Because what happens usually in the lab, because you're going for performance, is you slow it down. You can take all data deposits, it doesn't matter because you want it perfect. That's not saleable. It doesn't matter. It's nice if you want to write a paper, it's nice if you want to get your name on the NRL thing and you have a world record, but if you're going to go out into business and make money, this is how you make money. Speed gets you money. So, especially when you're in a market that's in the commercialization phase, like solar is going into. So this is, maybe no one wants to do this research, but it's exciting research, and I've done a lot of it. It's fun. We did some physics that no one's ever done before in plasmas. Dan Fleming, one of the world's foremost plasma physicists, said what we were doing at Novellus was impossible. But we did it. It was fun. So this can be, even if it's manufacturing, or it can be exciting. It can be cool stuff. Business models. I'll get off the technology innovation for a second. As technology and manufacturing has done pretty well in solar, the tech costs have come down, as you know, that now the panel costs are not insignificant, 25 to 30, 40% of the panel, depending on the system cost. But now it is all the other costs that matter. And so really, these costs are hard to get to: labor costs, permitting, finance costs, so-called soft costs, and balance of system costs. And so a new business model, so you have here, like Solar City, up in the left-hand corner. Of course, what Dan did was, I love the PACE program, different ways to raise money, crowdfunding. So I think there's great new business models, and that's just the beginning. There are more coming, and I think there's some interesting challenges. A couple of my favorites, you'll see this later in the wrap-up, a couple of my favorites are, you don't have to get a permit to go install an HDTV, or a refrigerator, or a washing machine. So imagine if you had a solar power appliance that you go down to Best Buy and buy. And it's interesting, Solar City is doing a deal with Best Buy right now. You go down to Best Buy and buy it, and suppose your house was already pre-wired, because houses come pre-wired with drivers. There's a 220 outlet there, you just plug it in and it works. Suppose your house was pre-wired with the inverter, everything else you need in there, you just go buy this appliance, plug it in, you're done. What would be the adoption rate of solar if it was that easy? So if you actually had, now this is an interesting one, this is not just a business model, the product isn't quite there. You see, I don't know if anyone's heard of Armageddon, but they took a first shot at that. I like what they did. They're not there yet, but it's pretty cool. I mean, that's the right idea. Make it easy, make it transparent, make it do-it-yourselfable. And I think that's an interesting business model. Just at the very beginning, not quite there yet. There's the community solar, one of my favorites. I love community solar, because I think community solar in combination with commercial may be how we're going to solve this. There's already kind of a solution for residential, and utility scale is off and running. So the commercial is maybe one of the huge untapped markets, because we have a problem there in that there's almost no economic advantage for the guy that owns the building to lease you the roof, unless he owns it himself. So you see the only real commercial successes are the Walmarts and Ikeas and all that they own their buildings. So there has to be continuity in the whole investment chain, or the early stage guys kind of start dropping out. Now that hasn't happened yet in solar. These guys have dropped out. This is still going on, this is going on. But if it continues that there's a funding gap in stage 4, the commercialization, then everyone along the way, well, why are we funding that? It's never going to go anywhere. So this is really one of the key issues, is to solve the stage 4 funding gap. The other thing I have here just to highlight is one of my pet peeves, and what led to the failure of many of the solar companies. And I'll pick NanoSolar is the clearest one of this, but it's in all of them. This is really the preferred risk profile you want to see as you go through these stages. It's high risk in R&D. We all know that. But you don't wait to reduce the risk until after the pilot line and you're in the commercialization phase. It's insane. So many companies in solar did that. It's unbelievable. What you want to do in the prototype stage, you can test everything. The key thing you have to do in test is not just the performance. In the prototype stage, you have to prove the cost. It's a commodity. We just have to keep remembering it's a commodity. So if you really look at proving the cost, and it's all provable in the prototype stage, you can eliminate 80% of the risk before you spend any significant amount of money. But because the industry violated this rule and it went straight across here, super high risk, billions were spent in venture money. Venture money is not supposed to be for that kind of work. Billions were spent in venture money down the drain because the risks weren't taken out of the equation before they tried to scale. And some companies knew it, realized it, and they still tried to scale because the management was embarrassed, afraid to tell the board the truth, that we have to back up. The technology isn't viable right now. So a lot of money was spent here, unfortunately, and so we're paying the price today for those failures right now, and it's my kind of personal mission to try to fix this. I'm working on it, and this is how I'm kind of working on it. So the challenge is develop these stage 4 investors. There's quite a few of them, fortunately, and really you have to really nurture, as I'm doing, nurture them all. You have your large VC and growth funds, they've kind of a little bit went to zero, but you still work them. Private equity is interesting. You put think of this is too early of investment for private equity, but they're seeing the 700% in Solar City stock growth, the 500% growth in sun power, all the Chinese stocks about 3x up, and you get graded on Wall Street based on your basket of portfolio and your returns. They're averaging 20% on their portfolio. They see a basket of solar stocks that average 200%. They go, we cannot not look at this. They have to look at it. So there's something good. One of my best trips has been to New York to talk to the private equity guys. They're not in Silicon Valley. They weren't burned by Solyndra. They don't even know what Solyndra is. That's good news. So that is actually a good one. Family offices are interesting. They're large growth, large capital groups that actually sometimes want to leave a kind of a legacy behind of doing something good for the world, and I think that actually helps. Governments, governments actually are great investment opportunities, because you see China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Russia, almost every government except the United States, it seems, is trying to drive manufacturing in their countries. So governments are good, and even maybe the U.S. government. I'm beginning to work with the DOE on this. Said we should not give up on solar manufacturing. So I think that's and then the strategics. These are the strategic companies where it's important for them to strategic, like Dow and DuPont in the United States, Kyocera in Japan. Materials companies look at this as a huge industry. They see it. They see this tipping point argument, and they say the material consumption is going to be huge. Let's get involved. Equipment companies, the same kind of thing. Energy companies. Semiconductor companies. So there's quite a few categories of strategic. So there's the list, the preliminary list I have on this one was 400 companies globally would be categories of being interested in solar. So, and they're billion-dollar corporations that have huge budgets to invest. So that's an opportunity there as well. I think on this, just as a point, what is really has happened poorly in solar has been the handoff from the early investors to the larger investors here. And I think we have to really work on it. In fact, the whole clean tech sector got caught up in this a little bit, a lot of the clean technologies. But there is good examples of handoffs that happen in the pharmaceutical and biotech. There were a lot of, the big pharma guys were involved much earlier on and helped even venture capitalists vet the companies. And they said, we will be the receptors of these technologies if you develop them through stage 1, 2, 3. We will pick it up. And that was kind of agreed beforehand. They were heavily involved in the receptor process. We missed that in clean tech. We didn't really set it up correctly in terms of the handoff, so that basically you have the people who can write $100 million checks ready to go. So I think partly that's a process issue. And the other last thing is that hopefully is helpful in this, because this is a challenge, is time does heal wounds. And one thing you can be sure of investors is that eventually greed overcomes fear. Because so greed's got everyone going, and if you were around in 2006, 2008, they were throwing money, I mean literally throwing money at solar companies. I had to go clean up one where they did 1 week of due diligence, gave them $15 million, and later on I had to go pick up the pieces, because you don't want to just do 1 week of due diligence. And so their greed was overcoming fear, it just went, The ironic thing was that was probably the worst time to invest in solar, and that's when about $6 billion went into the field. Now is the best time to invest in solar, and they don't want to look at it. So it's really kind of funny. But we haven't had this greed overcoming fear yet. So I think it's getting close, because now we see those stocks coming up thanks to the greed. It's like people looking at Solar City overcomes the memories of Solyndra. So this is kind of the equation that has to work in our favor, and it's working. And Solyndra's 2.5 years ago now, and we have some great companies. Enphase is doing well. Solar City doing well. Sun Power's come back. I mean, we have a lot of great successes, and so I think that'll work in our favor. So, of all the things in the entire book that I've worked on that are obstacles, I haven't seen any obstacles except for this one. The invest one is a challenge, so it's something we all need to think about and work on. Where to invest is it's almost like a PhD thesis here. When I was doing this at venture capital, I studied the market in a little bit of detail. There's 47 subsegments of the market shown here. I take them, being an engineer, I'm ridiculous. Everything goes into a spreadsheet. And so you have here, growth rate, entrenched competition, margins, tailwinds, strategic value, transfer perform, size of the market, all those things, graded, red, green, yellow, and all these weighted systems and everything else. To pick out of those things, where do you want to invest? And I have a chart that shows there's like a lot of different profiles and what those markets are. So I've actually looked at this in a little bit of detail. And some of the earlier slides I gave you a picture of where some of those investment opportunities are. And I want to bring them up as not just investment opportunities, but this might be areas where you might want to focus in the future. So when we break it down and I get more specific into the categories, the technology innovations, we already covered some of that. I think the one that they didn't mention is going back to Alta. Alta actually was a cool technology. It was just kind of developed with cost, but without consideration of cost. So there's kind of they went at it from a point of view of, let's build a Cadillac and have the world's highest performance and get more records, and then try to figure out minimize costs later. If you go at the same thing, because I believe in thin film on our side, I like it, but start with what's the lowest cost processing and see if I can get the efficiency up. Because you can't use a lot of traditional MOCVD with using trimethyl gallium. You do the math, it's almost like impossible. So you have to look at different precursors, different deposition techniques, different substrates. It turns out the substrate technology is challenging. But I think there may be exciting opportunities there. That's like one of the holy grails. Like if you can figure out how to do that, that is awesome, because if you can get the low cost structure, the high efficiency is a killer. Another one of my favorites, and this may not be clear what this is when you look at solar panels, the real cost is no longer in the solar cell. The cost is mostly in glass and encapsulant, in frames and hardware and everything else. So basically, what I challenged my group was to say, can we come up with a glassless, encapsulantless process? So it's always going to be thin film flexible, but can you just make it so when you're done making the solar cell, hermetically seal it and you're done? And so essentially, that would be an amazing breakthrough. Some of the manufacturing innovations we covered already. There's a few more that I grouped this as arms dealer kind of strategy. Sell to the, you don't compete in the silicon area. It's too hard, too much of a head start in China. So you just sell them things. Obviously, if you can figure out how to reduce silicon consumption, silver consumption, efficiency improvements, so there's a lot of opportunities there. The other one is, we mentioned thin film, the second one here. And also, we all talked about high throughput tools. So some of these, there's a lot more in there in terms of manufacturing innovations. And finally, the business model innovations, we kind of already covered the opportunities in kind of the do-it-yourself model or other business models. Essentially, if soft costs are now kind of your highest cost, what are the ways we can do the business differently to reduce finance, permitting, and all these other things that need to be addressed? So I think innovations are opportunities everywhere there. And Andy gave me the high sign I have to finish, so it's good I'm on the last slide. So essentially, bottom line is, I really believe solar's past the tipping point. We're really seeing the true birth of the industry, which is an economically driven growth as opposed to subsidy or policy driven growth. And my message there is just, we've really only just begun. We have 30 years here, and so this could be an exciting place to work, especially since that almost all that stuff is going to be driven by innovation. But it has to be broader perspective of innovation. So it's not technology innovations, it's how you manufacture and how you implement in the field, the whole deployment challenge, where you see business model innovation coming in. So I think basically, my bottom line is there's many opportunities for you to make a difference. And that's it, thanks.